dimensions of project, and we also discussed the components of project, what should be the ultimate objective. Then we discussed briefly about the proposal. So we know that in IGNO it is very systematic in a way that everything is pre-scheduled. So if a learner is little attentive and keep the dates, in his or her schedule, then the program completes very smoothly. So I was expecting that the learners who had come this morning will also join, because I I proposed that this afternoon we will discuss certain models, certain drafts of the proposals which the learners are supposed to prepare and then submit to the School of Humanities, the program coordinator, for their evaluation and subsequent approval or feedback on their proposals. As I mentioned, proposal is something that uh, explains what do you want to do. It is not project, because project is the final product, and it is the result of project proposal which has been sent, or which is to be sent, and then it is to be developed. So proposal is sort of intention expressed that, for example, if someone wants to do a proposal on writing novella, then he or she must write about the title, then objectives, why one has chosen writing novella, or writing poetry, or writing short stories, or for that matter article or feature, whatever it is. And then one should write that what will be the outcomes of this particular project, how this will be beneficial to the learners. So that was one aspect, and second aspect I explained that the proposal is one component, whereas the project report or project is the second component, which is to be submitted finally after completion of, after developing, rather I should be using the word, the project, and then putting it in proper format and submission to the headquarters for evaluation. That goes to the registrar, Students Evaluation Division, SED. This morning, number of queries were raised about the selection of topic, its treatment, and its development, and various other facets of writing a creative work, be it the writing for media, or writing for television, or writing the short stories, different types of short stories, or writing poetry, or likewise. So we have decided this afternoon to discuss particularly about the methodology of developing, what goes into the methodology while putting up a proposal. Because methodology is one thing which has to be taken care in the proposal itself. Methodology is a strategy of working on something. So the way you work, what challenges do you see in a particular field, how the challenges are going to be met, and likewise. So this whole schema of activities, the approach, various devices and tools, in fact, all that goes into completing a project is the part of methodology. So that has to be explained very well by the learner to the faculty, to the for the evaluation. So some guidelines for project proposal and project reports we will discuss, we will come to the selection of topic, which is the first point in the proposal. So if we look at the proposal, it contains the, say for example, if one uses novella, so that means novella is just a single writing, because as we discussed earlier, for a short story or for feature or for writing scripts for radio and television or for writing reviews, etc., there has to be 10 to 15 different short stories, different features, different articles, different scripts for radio and television, and different reviews. But if it is a novella, we have already discussed that novella is something that is one single writing, which makes, what I am trying to say, that novella alone makes the condition of nearly, writing about 20,000 words. So, but what should be written about novella? So the learner has to write about the title, then write about the form of a novella, which novella, what type of novella, and because we know that there are formula novellas, that means there are it is a kind of creative writing which happens to describe the normal human relations. Then there are personal agreements, disagreements. Then if there are a young couple, then there are fights, then there are issues. All that comes into it. They are moving away, then coming back, and then the issues of children, then the family affairs. All this comes into the formula novellas. More recently, there has been novellas which are experimental. So these experimental novellas are basically the kind of novellas which you know which moves away from the prototypes. That means which is not just discussing a kind of structural approach to writing. That means first of all you create the structure. That means form, and form means there is a beginning, there is a middle, or the developmental phase, then there is a climax, and there is the end. But some people these days are not sticking to these conditions. They are beginning. Sometimes it is also considered now good to begin with an abrupt statement. So abrupt statement, in fact, being used to unfold the whole story. We also understand that novella is a long story. It's part of fiction, but then its treatment and its size and dimensions are quite huge. So that's the difference between short story and a novella. But the issue as regard to the structure, people have started writing without following the convention or the conventional structure of the novellas. Then there are experimental novellas that are like we told you that it doesn't follow the so-called conventions, and then it is believed that whatever comes to one's mind, that should be allowed to be creatively put into a fiction, of course with some facts, with a theme that has to come from somewhere. But how it is treated, that is part of the experimental writing of novellas. Then stream of consciousness, etc. Stream of consciousness is another way of writing. That is That writing means it is to deal with the person's own kind of dialogue with self. So here it is not based on the characters that are taken from outside, but a person speaks to one's own consciousness, one's own self. So the whole story unfolds. In this case, there are autobiographies or kind of writing where one, critically examines one's own self. There's a dialogue between the person within the person itself. So those are also kind of novellas. So it is easier in the sense that novella itself can make 20,000 words, but it has to be very seriously considered because writing a novella is not that simple. The treatment of novellas or the novel is quite complex, and one has to understand how to justify that. So, in putting up a proposal to write novella, one has to mention the title, some appropriate title, and then the learner also have to state the objectives very clearly, methodology of writing it, and then they must explain which form of novella they will be developing. If it is formula novella, then it has to be in a setting and atmosphere which is a social atmosphere, family atmosphere, human relations, and so forth. If it is experimental, then perhaps one can definitely move away from the conventions and can write. And then there is a stream of consciousness where it is not based on there are no more than one character, and here the person or the character speaks to one's own self. Maybe the self itself is characterized, and then there is a dialogue between the two shades of self. One, the person is asking questions to one's own self, and then there are answers which are coming from one's own self. So it is a dialogue within oneself. My greatest emphasis on the discussion primarily is on the features and articles. Uh, how to write features and articles, and also while proposing to write feature or article, what should be considered as important in the proposal. It is already stated that at least 8 to 10 uh, features have to be proposed. So if 8 to 10 features have to be proposed, that means there is a good amount of work to be done. So if 8 to 10 features have to be proposed, all these features should together make roughly 20,000 words. Each feature, each article should be around 500 to 600 words so as to make 2000 words. So that is one feature has to be around 2000 words. So making a feature is not that complex. Reason being that there are so many diverse themes that are available. But one should think very seriously, and one has to write at least 8 to 10 features. So that means there has to be 8 to 10 titles, and each title must be justified in its own way, and there has to be clear statement about each title, about a line or two stating how it will be dealt with. So not only that the title of the feature has to be very categorically, very clearly spelled out, the treatment will also have to be clarified. Uh, I gave some example this morning. I also discussed articles. I would like, before I come to the sample feature or title of the features, I told this morning that it is very important that the articles are written not as research article, but as articles uh, for the creative writing. So perhaps you can question me why, what difference is there between research articles and the articles meant for the creative writing. The research articles have a standard format. They have referencing system. They have in-text references, lot of quotations, and every information is evidenced by source, by some reference. But that is not the case with the writing for the articles for creative writing, because here the article means some thought-provoking write-ups which have a little scope for bringing about or dealing with the human feelings, dealing with some political issues in such a way that it links to our own life, day-to-day life. So I think one has to distinguish between the articles for research as well as articles for creative writing. That is very important. Now coming back to feature, what is a feature? Feature is basically based on the facts, but some fictionalization of the facts is done, and it is done in order to attract the listeners or the viewers. So therefore, the feature must have some concrete information, and then there has to be some fictionalization of the facts, or the environment is fictionalized around those piece of informations, and then it is presented in a way that it presents piece of information which is presented elegantly in a manner that it appeals to the listener, to the viewer. Or, for example, if you see, if it is an environment. Let's say, for example, if somebody wants to produce a feature on environment, one can do that, but the problem with such titles is that they are too large, too big. So it is very difficult to sum up such a huge uh, topic, or a topic with such a huge scope. In that case, it can be done that some aspects of environment, like a feature can be human intervention in human interventions in Doon Valley. So their feature can uh, focus on the results like landslides, like tree cutting, like warm summers, and all those issues into it. So that means there has to be research about the happenings, about the aftermaths of people's intervention. A lot of people are coming, the nature is disturbed, and there is impact on the environment. So, or you can create a picture like environment changes in the Doon Valley. That will be very useful. The reason being, you are not talking about environment, which is a very important topic and a very vast topic. So it has to be brought into uh, focus where a particular aspect of the environment is focused. So that is one such example. Uh, the problem with proposing a feature writing is to describe its framework. Uh, that means a feature doesn't allow you to digress from the central theme. If it is Boon Valley, if it is the sort of hot summers in Boon Valley, then the focus has to be on the hot summers. That means why the summers are more warmer than conventionally it used to be, or if it is not snowing anymore, then that is also a problem. So one has to keep in mind that the proposal should be such that you don't waver away from the central theme which has been chosen. So, like I was telling you, like feature is on Boon Valley, environment changes in Boon Valley. So then you will only discuss, or as I mentioned, hot summers in Boon Valley, hot summers in Manali. Uh, so- or like recently there has been flash floods in Manali. So you can say Manali summers is, so that you can bring about the information, bring about the visuals, bring the uh, whatever damages has been caused to the life and property of the people. So, but the problem with it is that major part of the discussion should go into the central theme, and that theme shouldn't be overlooked or sidelined at any point of time. Now, another problem with feature writing that we have discussed in the unit where we talked about the feature and documentaries, both for radio and television and for print, that one has to decide as to how to start. So one doesn't, embark upon writing straight, just directly. One should think seriously as to how to start. For example, if we are talking about the tea gardens in Kerala, the Mannar area, then how to start about it? So one can say Nilgiri tea is making international headlines. Nilgiri tea makes international headlines. So that could be a good catchy title, and then you can begin. Uh, Recently, there was an exhibition of the tea growers where the lot of varieties of tea were presented. Startingly, the tea from Kerala was declared to be an important development in the tea cultivation. So that way, that means your initial decision to write or the way you start writing has to be very crafty, very thoughtfully proposed, and one has to make sure that it refers to the audience directly. Say, for example, if we are talking about the environmental changes in Doon Valley, people have straight away interest in it. They would like to know why this is happening. Both the local residents as well as the tourists. When the tourists are concerned, if they visit Doon Valley, it will not be cool, which they had thought it to be. Similarly, if you are talking about the tea in uh, Mannar, then people of the Munnar area will be interested. So the beginning has to be very, very intelligently decided. Second point is that how to share your writing with the target. That means how to relate your writing with the audience or the readers. So the readers are or the audience are homogeneous, not homogeneous, heterogeneous. Nobody knows where one finds the reader. So that means the writing should be such that it addresses the universal issues. It should not be addressed to an individual's issue. There are features which are written about the individuals also, like if there is a feature about the President of India, like EPJ Kalam, then that will talk about his or her achievements. But since that personality is such that there are millions of people who are in the fan following of that particular personality, so then automatically it has a large audience, both in terms of readers and viewers. So that has to be kept in mind that it gets related to the target audience. Means if the policies which deals with the political policies which are decided by the government, and if you are writing feature for magazines, if you are writing feature for journals, then that can take care of such articles which deal with the policies, etc. of the government. So this has to be very consciously decided. No, the problem with our learners is that they straight away land upon writing features or writing articles. That will not be possible. One must read the particular genre very extensively. Maybe one should go through certain magazines, certain newspapers, certain journals, and then find out what are the topics which are being discussed, which are being taken for writing features. There are features on the contemporary usage on the English literature, English language. There are features about the Indian writings in English. So that means there can be a feature on the language itself. There can be a feature on the tradition, on the history, or on the formats of writing in English in India. So that will bring in some acclaimed authors, some critique, maybe some students, and then the feature can go ahead with the good, useful directions. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever kind of feature you want to write, because you have to write at least 10 features, so it is not small. That you read the features of that particular media. That means if it is print media, you should read newspapers. If it is journals and magazines, then because again there is a difference between the features which are written for newspapers or written for the Magazines or journals writing is such which is this writing stays for very over a period of time. So what I'm trying to do that the idea that do not take any genre or ordinary just about so that it actual information. I had a power breakdown just now, which was a very abrupt uh, ending of the connection. Sorry for that, but let me just continue our discussion. We were talking about various types of features which are based on the information which are based upon the theme, like dealing with the newspaper, magazines, and also features which deals with the children's issues. There are features which deals with certain other sections of the society. Particularly, if we focus our attention to the inflationary budget, then the affected parties include youth who are likely to be affected by the hefty form fee submissions, etc. Besides, there will be another big segment which will be affected. Those are the housewives and ladies. So usually you might have seen that these are the targets who are interviewed, who are included in the information. So those issues have to be, those aspects of any writing have to be considered. So what I'm trying to put across is that when you write feature, write article, first of all know the genre very well, like what is feature and how feature is different from article. One. Secondly, what type of feature you are writing, whether you are writing for newspaper, you are writing for journal, you are writing for radio, television, or you are writing it for magazine. So there also has to be consideration, because writing for journals and writing for newspaper is quite different. Newspaper is contemporary and perishable after uh, fixed periodicity, but the journals are such which stays for a very long time. So that means the information has to be very, very precise, and its relevance must continue for a longer period. So that requires a good effort. If we come to the feature, if we come to the article now, for newspapers, there are articles in the magazines and journals also. So first of all, one has to distinguish between features and articles. So when it is done, then one should clearly understand what we discussed the feature. We now discussing articles. What is article? Article for the creative writing has to be different from the article which is for the research. So that means it is the article for feature, article for the creative writing must include some such a topic which has a scope for writing, creative writing. I told you, if someone writes uh, like deep blue, marine life in the deep blue ocean, or one say uh, uh, the seven stars, the seven angels in the deep blue ocean. So these kinds of topics, or say for example, if one writes an article about Himalayas, then one should go into some flowery title, like one can say the heavenly abode in Himalayas. Or if one writes an article on, for example, the examination tension for the children, then one should say, uh, stay aware about your child's exam anxiety. Stay aware about your child's exam anxiety. So that could be one title. There can be hundreds and thousands such titles dealing with a lot of areas that we have around us. So, but the issue is that how you deal with it. How do you decide as to what I should be writing? So that should be based upon your extensive studies, a lot of introspection, what are your abilities, and whether this is going to be interesting. And moreover, just now I mentioned, it should have an ability to relate it to the target. Don't write something about children and talk about the adults. Talk about the financial matters. Talk about the foreign policy. So if you are writing about the children, you can write about how to learn from the toys, how to talk. I mean, you can talk about the animals, birds, animation, fairy tales, And maybe if you want to add a little bit of education into it, you can create a story where there are animals, where there are birds, those has different characters, and then they are helping each other, to come out of the bad situation. So there you can inculcate a message that working together is beneficial. So, but it is important that your topic, your subject, your treatment of the topic relates to the target group. So be it housewives, or if it is the children, or if it, say for example, if you are choosing the industrial stress, that if that is the issue of your article, unrest in the cotton industry, so that cannot be a very good article, but then it must relate to the cotton growers and the industry, and perhaps it must also be relating to the labor, to the people who work in the cotton industry. So you should bring in such discussion point of discussions which are relevant to these groups, to these categories of people. So maybe, as I mentioned a little while ago, one shouldn't embark upon writing straight away. Before writing, one should start thinking of how to begin, and whether the writing is going to be directly related to someone, some uh, target that you have decided. Likewise, if you come to short stories, we have already discussed that it is required that one must propose at least 8 to 10 short stories. So that means there has to be a short story around 2000 words. So a small brief about short story has to be given in 2 to 3 lines. Not for all the short stories 2 to 3 lines, but each story has to be projected in a proposal, and for each story you have to write a small sub synopsis. Uh, so that is the job, that is the care one has to take. Uh, the, the, the issue is that not only the titles should be appropriate of the short stories, but the treatment also has to be very, very precise, and it has to be clearly stated how the short story will begin. That means what would be the plot, what will be the beginning, what will be the development, and what will be the climax, and how it will end, either in a closed-ended manner, open-ended manner, or in a twisted manner. So, and then another issue uh, about the short stories. We discussed it in the morning also, that there are several types of short stories. We have discussed that there are formula stories, there are detective stories, there are experimental stories, and there are children's stories. So these are 3, 4 major uh, types of short stories. If someone decides to write about the formula stories, then one has to know what one we normally know the human relationships, the kinship relationship, and the tensions between the relations, the social and cultural issues. All these are part of the formula story. So these will be there. So one has to uh, understand this very clearly and propose a top short story based on this. There are detective stories. We decided we discussed uh, what are the formats of detective stories. So we know there is a different plot which has and then there are certain characters who have a specific qualification. Then there are certain central characters, there are associate characters to the central characters, like we have one detective. Detective is one who detects something, and then there are certain associates who help him in various activities, and then there is a person who is qualified to be a chemist, or a person who can give good analysis, technical information, technical analysis. And then the major distinction of detective stories is that they are usually closed ended, because they come with the definitive conclusion, and when they reaches the climax, then there's a resolution of conflict. So there is an announcement, clear cut announcement, yes, so and so is the guilty, and so has committed the crime by using this particular thing, that may be poison or some other weapon, or so. Then there are experimental stories or the children stories we already discussed. When you depart from the conventions of the traditional stories, then you come into the arena of experimental stories. And then if you move a little ahead, that was the discussion about children's stories. So you can choose any topic from these range of topics. But yes, someone asked this morning whether one has to choose or propose only stories of one type. No, you can choose from any format, but you have to write synopsis for each stories separately. That means the synopsis has to be written in 2 to 3 lines for each short story, its title and its explanation. This will be separate from the methodology, this will be separate from the objective, this will be separate from the introduction of the title. So, if it is a formula story, then I have already told you it culminates in the climax where the conflict is resolved, or there is a tragic or a happy ending, and there are a lot of characters in it, and they all are very intimately associated to our life, day-to-day affairs, and so forth. I have already explained the detective stories. These are different type of stories which have a very prominent feature, that is the creation of suspense and and sustenance of suspense. So if you write, if you like ghost stories, if you like stories which deals with certain crimes, which deals with certain suspense activities or dubious activities, they always have suspense is created through the dialogues, through various narrations, and then the art of writing detective stories is to sustaining the suspense, which is very difficult. So that has to be there. So if you are interested in writing the detective stories, you must know how the character behaves. They behave in a very systematic manner, very professional manner, and very formal way. The detective is a seasoned person having specialization in one or the other field. He makes very precise statements. So there is an element of suspense. There is an element of wrongdoing, sometimes or most often, and then there is an element of inquisitivity. The listener or the reader is always in search of what is next, what is next. So that has to be same is with the experimental stories. So if we talk about the experimental, if you want to take experimental stories as project, uh, then see, experimental stories are those stories which have been written where life has been seen differently. The life patterns are similar, but it is seen differently. So it doesn't provide or it doesn't care much about the plot or the structure or the form. So it doesn't have a proper or definitive beginning or end. In fact, it only deals with the significant or the major or impact making aspects of the plot. So the story is usually open ended. It is left for the interpretation by the readers or the listeners, and it has a very sometimes it has a very lyrical or informal end, and then they simply faded in the thin air like this. So experimental stories are stories which there are two major characteristics. One is that they do not pay much attention to the form or the structure. That is to say that they do not care much about the plot, beginning, climax, and the end. And secondly, they focus primarily on the not much on the climax, but much on the significant moments of that particular plot, you can say. The focus is on that. It can abruptly begin and can abruptly end. Then there are short stories which are specifically meant for the children. Children's writing is slightly different, and it is a highly demanding, writing, because there is a very few writers writings. There are few writers who endeavors to write for children. Most often, writing for children end in the writing for adults, because we often tend to waver from the psyche and the issues of children. So one has to very carefully plan it out. I don't know, someone from the group will be a good author, a good short story writer for children. So why not try it out? It is different both in content and design. The problem with the writing for children is that there has to be careful selection of the children group, children's group, age group. There are 2 to 4 years, 4 to 6 years, 6 to 9 years, 9 to 12 years, and above. So one must one's writing or one's style, language, diction has to be commensurating with that particular age group. You see, one cannot write for children who are in the age group of 12 to 15 in the same way as one writes for children of 4 to 6 age group. The content also differs. For senior children, for elder children, there has to be little uh, elderly contents. There has to be content which deals with the which presents a worldview on certain issues like that. But for us, children who are up to the age of 6 or 7, they are not concerned with such issues. They simply want rhymes, rhythm. They want sort of spontaneous spontaneity in the writing. They want imitations. They want a lot of activity, a lot of impulsiveness, and so forth. So it's a writing full of you know challenges, writing full of mm, imagination. I should be using the word a lot of imagination. So children like to imagine even the impossible things they to imagine. So that has to be like that, and language and the content. Besides content, the language has also to be very very importantly decided, because small children have small vocabulary, They do like small sentences. They do not like grammatically very complex sentences. And children like to listen or read about their own lives, how about animals, about birds, about nature, and so forth. So there has to be a sense of humor. There has to be good sense of humor. They don't like very serious writing. That is not their take. So this is for writing for children. We have some time left, so I will discuss scripts for radio and television. So, because this is one area which can be explored for project proposal for DCE-06. So here you can write scripts for radio and television production. Uh, Writing for radio and writing for television, we have already read in the DCE4, in DCE3, in couple of units, and there was a extensive discussion. What we have to clearly understand that writing for radio is completely different from writing for television. This is very important. One must not remain in any doubt that writing for radio and television is very simple or very similar to each other. No, 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 that is not the case. These two medias are very very different. One is sound medium, another is audio visual medium. Radio requires a complete script. Television requires very brief and different type of script, which allows amalgamation of visuals, interviews, and certain other type of materials. In radio, there is a sound modulation. In television production, the major emphasis is on the visuals, how effectively visuals are put into the built into the script. Then the script writer for radio has to understand that all the emotions, all the feelings, all the impact that has to be created on the listener, uh, that has to be created through the use of appropriate words, style of delivery, modulation of voice, and so forth. So that means uh, the script has to be such that it has uh, in, carefully crafted dialogues. The problem at that impact is created through dialogues also, because nobody is there to give an extra emphasis. Just like in television production, we have visuals. They bring in a lot of emphasis on a particular point. So all that has to be done by the script itself. So the scripting has to be written very intelligently. I told the other day while I was talking about the radio, radio is for one and all. That means radio broadcast is uh, taken very seriously by the listeners. So your listener feels it is for me itself. Yes, please. Yes, come with your question, please.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, yeah, please speak.
Sir, I am asking that, sir, in online program, that how can we submit our practical or do our practical, sir? Practical
I
paper.
didn't get you, sir. Can you make a bit louder?
Sir, is it audible right now properly, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, very clear.
Yeah, yeah, sir. Sir, I am asking that in online program, How can we, sir, submit the practical paper or to do the practical paper?
What is practical paper?
I mean, sir, in assignment there is 70 marks. Some paper there is 35 marks is theory and 30 marks is 35 marks for practical. So in study center, who have enrolled in
Course are
study
you talking?
center,
Which course are you talking about?
sir, I'm talking about BLIS OL.
Oh, 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 oh.
Yes, sir.
No, BLIS program is not entirely online. It has certain components. Those have to be completed through practice also. So it has different strategy. Maybe you have to go through the whole scheme of distribution of marks.
Okay, sir. I
Because it
mean,
has certain
for
practical work, so that has to be done at a lab.
okay, so you have to go to the lab for study center or
That
regional
will
center,
be arranged,
or it is in online.
no, that will be arranged by your study center. Even if you are online student, for a
Yeah.
lab practical purpose, you might have to attend some sessions at some designated lab, maybe on your own or arranged by the study center. So, because I now got your point, you're talking because BLIS has a practical component that has to be done live on some laboratories. It has a lab. There are certain practical sessions. I do agree.
Okay, sir.
But is that your? Uh,
Sir, and one more query, one another query, sir. That what is the difference between, sir, distance and the online program? Means it online is equivalent to, sir, distance, or I mean, what is the value of, sir, online program right now? Because I have enrolled this BLS program in online, so it is equivalent to the distance or like a regular
no,
program,
no.
sir.
Basically, the only difference is the methodology with which the program is transacted. In online mode, you receive the study material. Sorry, in distance mode, you receive the study material both
Okay.
in form or maybe in the digital form.
Sir,
That
is
is
the prospective view of the degree, sir? Is the prospective view of the degree? It
no,
is,
no, no.
sir.
Listen to me. Online facility is only made available for students who cannot visit the study center, who do want to pursue it on their own. But as far as degree is concerned, it is similar value. There is no difference between the degree which is provided for distance mode or for online mode.
Okay.
Okay, so we will. I think that the query was
Yes, sir.
little out of place, not concerning with our discussion, but nevertheless, yes, it is there. So we appreciate it. So anybody else has a question with regard to putting up a proposal for project of a DCE program, which is DCE-06? Uh, would somebody like to put in some query? Yes. So if it is not, if there is no query, I gave a challenge this morning to all of you that bring about a small or what I should say kacha draft, and we will discuss it. You should have begun right away, in fact, because preparing a proposal takes if it takes very long time, then it entails a lot of delay on the part of the school also, because there will be a lot of proposals that are coming, and at all the proposals are submitted at one point of time, then it takes a lot more time. So you should have come with some format so that we can discuss it here, and it helps others also. Anyway, since that has not happened, so I will go with the last point of our discussion, which is scripts for radio and television. I briefly mentioned about the nature of scripts that is written for radio and television. Mind you that radio has such a large gamut of programs. It has any number of genres. There are talks, there are news, there are news magazines, there are special audience programs, there are programs for children, programs for women, there are programs for youth, and I mean there are radio plays, there are story recitation, there are music programs, there are so many different programs are there on radio. Now this is a problem. What you cannot write script for radio. What to write for radio? You don't write for radio. You write for a format of radio. If one is asked to write a script for radio talk, that will be one area. If you are asked to prepare a script for radio play, that is one area. If you are asked to write a script for discussion, paricharcha, that is one area. If you are asked to write for radio feature, that is one area. You can choose documentary that for radio, that is one area. How many areas are there in radio? Problem is how to write for different areas. That means there has to be, each area demands different writing, different approach. If it is for feature, you should know how radio features are broadcast. Radio features are very intelligently written. It begins with a very impressive style. That means the narrator has an important role in radio broadcast, or a broadcaster has a very big role, or the characters, those who are in the play, because entire impact has to be created only through the words, modulation of sound. There are no other means which will be helpful. Similarly, if you go for television, then there is a variety of programs on television. There are music programs for which a very serious, very impactful script is written. You might have seen like Chitrahar, like Vividha, like Cine Sansar, and so many programs. We had serials, we had soaps, we have different shows, we have quiz programs. If you are writing a script for quiz programs, very tough, very challenging, but it is one important area of telecast or the broadcast on television. So please decide for what area of television or radio you are going to write. Number one, duration for radio talk is usually 13 to 14 minutes. It is not 28 minutes. It is not 5 minutes. If it is 5 minutes, it is a snippet. If it is 30 minutes, it is not a talk. So find out your duration for each genre in the radio. If it is for discussion, it is 30 minutes. If it is for talk, it is 13 minutes. If it is for a radio play, it is sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 60 minutes. So this is not a simple task to choose or simple task to write. You have to go deeply into the media. If it is radio, think over all the aspects of radio, and then decide which one is to be taken for writing. Same is with the television. Decide which aspect you would like to write upon. It is not simple. It is very difficult. It is very challenging. What you can do, write. Because if it is a small program, you have to write so many scripts. If it is a bigger program, you have to write less number of scripts. So that has to be there. At least there has to be 20,000 words, in the writing itself. So the difference between writing for journals, writing for magazines, writing for newspaper is different in the sense that in radio article you can write maybe 1000 words or 2000 words or 3000 words at a stretch. But that you cannot do with radio writing because radio writing, for radio writing programs has to be according to the length of the broadcast. So this is a challenge. So do not remain in dark uh, that you can go and write for radio and for television straight away. No, that will not be happening. You have to decide which program you are choosing, what is the duration of the program, what is the category of the program, who are the listeners of that program, or whether the program is having some different other components. Say, for example, if it is a music program of classical music, then there is a different script which will be written, and then there will be spaces for incorporation of music. If it is a radio play, then it has to be fully written, and then it has to be narrated, played by the artists in the studios. So, two, three important things are: choose your area with your interest and care, whether it is radio or television. Decide, what type of program you choose, and accordingly you have to write the script. If it is for youth program, you can write uh, informational script. You can write employment based script, which is to look for the avenues and opportunities. You can write programs which are purely entertainment based. You can write program for health education. You can write program for agriculture activities. You can write script for the agricultural program. Similarly, if you choose television, then you have to choose the stream, its duration, its target audience, target viewers, and decide what is the preference of the viewers. So accordingly, you have to write the script. So it's not. It is quite a challenging job to write script, whether it is radio or it is television or it is newspaper. Please, please be very careful while you decide the media or decide the theme. Then see within one area there are a lot of sub areas. Choose intelligently the sub area, then think about the target of that sub area of writing, then develop your style to write accordingly, which is commensurating with the target, the area, and above all, the constraints of the media. What I am trying to say, constraints of the media. If you write for journals and magazines, their space is very expensive. You see, you cannot go on writing 10,000 words, 20,000 words, or 5,000 words. A good article is roughly around 2,000 words and can be accommodated by any magazine, by any journal. But if you write 4,000, definitely it will not be appreciated because they have very limited space. They have to bring in a lot of other sections. So, uh, you have to be considerate about it. And for radio and television, I have already told you there are special audience programs, there are restriction of time, restrictions of the scope, a restriction of for television bringing in about multi, content variety. There has to be spoken word, there has to be narration, there has to be visuals, there has to be text on the screen. That I use the word subtitles and subtitles. That is also part of the script writing. Script writer must provide space for the subheadings, which will appear as either subtitles or the subtitles. So this was about choosing an area, choosing a field for writing for radio and television. Finally, I come to the writing poetry. So one has to write approximately 12 to 15 poems. So, as we discussed the other day, writing poetry, you know, we talked about the areas from where you can choose your themes. You know, so you can choose your theme from the area which we discussed the other day, and the the theme must be such that it should have an image or symbol. We talked about image, imagery, symbol, and then it must relate to the outside world, because poetry is something that if it is not relating to our day-to-day life or the outside world, it is not appreciated. It is not read that way. So theme is very important, and we all know how poetry speaks. Poetry does not speak directly from the poet to the listener or the audience or to the viewers. There is a different person, group of person who speaks, then the images, then the words, and then there are metaphors, then there is a symbol, and ultimately it reaches. So that process is we have already discussed. So one has to write keeping in view the theme, image, and symbol. You write something for which there are symbols so that it can be related. Image can be there, theme can be there, but if there are no symbols in the, for example, if one has taken a theme which revolves around the beauty of the sea or the coast, then there will definitely be an image of the water, shades of water, streams, and all that goes into making of the huge waves. So that has to be written in an environment where these things exist. But it cannot be, symbols cannot be from Himalayas. So it has to be kept in mind. And then, so choose your theme. Only caution you have to take is that minimum each poetry must be of 14 lines, at least 14 lines. Maybe it is slightly larger in size, but at least 14 lines. The care has to be taken. So you have to also decide whether it is your poetry is going to be lyrical poetry, a sonnet, or a free verse. So we discussed what is sonnet, what is lyrical poetry, what is metrical poetry, what is free poetry or free verse poetry. We also discussed the experimental poetry. So do take care while deciding the particular type of poetry you want to write. And you see, sometimes the poetry is also a narrative style. Sometimes we read a poetry which speaks about one person, his or her story, and it is described through different scenes, emotions, and an idea. So maybe overall, summing up the writing about poetry in proposal for poetry writing, one has to be clear in one's mind because one has to have an appropriate understanding of the various literary devices. If one doesn't understand the literary devices, it is very difficult. If one is not appreciating the emotions and ideas, well, it is difficult to write poetry. So there are moods in the poetry. There are certain literary devices we discussed, like similes, metaphors, epithets, and various types of moods. So if all those are understandable and appealing, then perhaps one can choose poetry as a format for writing the project. So while preparing proposal, I think assess yourself. Do not overestimate or underestimate. Uh, Consider your taste and also consider the resources that are at hand with you. Because you cannot write something which is not only difficult for you to write, but you don't have time to do so. So consider the area in which you are intending to write. So with this, I conclude the discussion. And if any question to be discussed, otherwise we will meet tomorrow, and then we will continue our discussion. But I still hope that by tomorrow some of you must bring some sample proposal so that we discuss it in the session. And if there are any issues to be improved, areas to be improved, we can discuss those areas, and then maybe within the next week or so, you are able to finally submit your proposal to the program coordinator for approval. Any question, any point you would like to discuss? I think we had a fair, exhaustive discussion on the project proposal, particularly choose writing the proposal and methodology and various areas which are suggested for writing poetry. One area which is left yet to be discussed is the area besides these areas which we discussed above. Uh, Other areas can also be brought in, but we will discuss them tomorrow. And I look forward to your presence because this is the culmination or culminating point of the discussion of this 20-24 days activity. Uh, in fact, the entire study has to come in through the project. If project is good, that means you have understood the various discussions. Sample proposal, and we will discuss it. Have a very good day, and thanks for your patient listening and discussion. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you, RC. We are closing this session and we'll begin our session tomorrow at 11. Thanks a lot.